you may have your seats. Yeah. First of all, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please, I'll ask for a moment of silence. This happened this morning. My former superintendent and her son died this morning. Very sad situation. I will ask you all for a moment of silence. Thank you. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Good afternoon. Let me begin to extend warm greetings and best wishes to His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I thank him for the warm reception I have received since my arrival here in Nigeria. Our gracious host, His Excellency Sir Siminalayi Fubara, Governor of Rivers State, Honorable Chief Lateef Asakun Kanmi Fagbemi, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Nigeria, Excellencies, Justices, and members of the Judicial Branch, honorable members of the Nigerian Parliament, other officials of the Nigerian government, the President and members of the Nigeria Bar Association, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. May I also give special recognition to my good friend and brother, Mr. Babatunde Kwame Ogala, who traveled to Liberia to encourage me to accept the honor of addressing the historic assembly. I'm glad to be here today, attending the 66th Annual General Conference of the Nigerian Bar Association here in Port Harcourt. With a membership of over 150,000, the Nigerian Bar Association is the biggest, longest, oldest, and one of the most respected professional bodies on our continent. I want to thank you for choosing a team as bold as Beyond Limits. When I first heard it, I smiled, because if my own life has taught me one thing, it is that limits are very often not the walls we think they are. They are the only edge of what someone has tried so far. I did not come here as a lawyer, and I will not pretend to be one. I grew up in the ghetto of Gibraltar in Monrovia, Liberia, where very few believe that a boy raised largely by his grandmother will one day stand on the world's biggest football stages or take an oath as president of the Republic of Liberia. I was told in many quiet and not so quiet ways what the limits of my life were supposed to be. I did not accept them, not out of arrogance, but because the limits placed us by man are not the same as the limits placed on us by God. Beyond limits, to me, is not a slogan. It is a living testimony of life. I'm not here merely to tell you my story, but because what is true for one man can also be true for a profession and for a continent. Allow me to speak to you about two things today. The first, the bar and the bench are guardians of our democracy and the dangers that threatens the guardianship in West Africa today. And second, what it means for our people and our continent to truly go beyond limits, not in slogan, but in substance. Let me start with a simple truth. I came to understand not as a student of law, but as a man who has sat in the highest office of a nation. Democracy does not survive on strength of elections alone. Elections are now the doorway into democracy, not the horse itself. What holds us up, what keeps the roof from collapsing on the people live inside it, are institutions, and among the most important of these in every serious nation is an independent judiciary protected by a fearless principal bar. And let me be plain about something else, because it is often more dangerous of the two threats of democracy. The danger is not only that soldiers might seize power in the night, or that a defeated candidate might refuse to leave office. It is also a leader who arrives in office through a free and fair elections can over time and often gradually begin to govern like the very dictators that ballot was meant to guard against. Leaning on the judiciary until it bends to his will, and strong army and legislative until it's become an echo chambers rather than a check on his power. A tyrant with a certificate of return is still a tyrant. Democracy, properly understood, does not end on an election night. It is tested every single day after in how power treats the courts and the parliament that exists to restrain it. was glad to learn in preparing to come before you that your own outgoing president, Mazi Afam Osigwe, said something not long ago that I found myself nodding, as though he had seen my own notes before I wrote them. He said, democracy cannot survive on strong men. It survives on strong institutions. That sentence deserves to be written above the door of every parliament and every courtroom in West Africa. A conviction that every serious African who has held power and hope to build something that stayed after him must eventually arrive at. The rule of law is not an abstract phrase for law school lecture halls. It is the practical guarantee that the citizen rights do not depend on who is in office or what favor they can secure. That a journalist, a trader, or a student in Port Harcourt, Monrovia, or Bamako has the same protection under the law as a minister or a general. The moment that guarantee weakens, everything else in a nation weakens with it. Investment, security, public trust, and peace itself. And here is the uncomfortable part. This danger does not only come from the coup makers who seize power in the night. It also comes from the government that call themselves democratic through budgets, manipulations, wrong appointments, and pressure on judges, and deciding that courts should be a convenient rather than a check. We have seen nations where a judiciary's own budget must first pass through the executive. It is meant to hold accountable. We have seen social courts, special courts, created not to deliver justice, but to secure political outcomes. And dozens of judges dismissed in a single stroke by presidential decree. And we have seen across our region since 2020 an unsettling pattern of soldiers stepping over constitutional altogether. I raise this example because this bar to which you belong and have gathered here in your thousand cannot afford to assume that Nigeria or Liberia or any of us is somehow immune. A court decision must mean what they say without any political permission. It is what protects a nation from sliding gradually and progressively into the very condition we condemn when soldiers do it with guns. That tradition is not decoration. It is duty because protecting the independence of the court and the rights of the ordinary Nigerian citizen is protecting democracy itself here in Nigeria and across our region. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me turn to the second things I wish to leave with you. Beyond limit is not only about defending what we have. It is about reaching for what we have not yet built. I have never believed that Africa's limits are a matter of talent. I have stood beside the finest footballers our continent has produced and sat at negotiating tables with head of states from every corner of the earth. We Africans are not short of brilliance. We are short too often of the infrastructure and the organized will to let that brilliance connect to itself with us. This room is a proof of it. The Nigerian bar counts among its numbers some of the finest legal minds in the world, many of whom have built extraordinary careers abroad, in London, in Washington, in the Gulf. That is nothing to be ashamed of, but it is something we must be strategic about. For too long, we have called this only a brain dream, as though it is purely a loss. I ask you to think instead about brain circulation, putting that expertise back into nation building without demanding anyone abandon what they have earned and learned abroad. Our African diaspora already sends home well over the $100 billion a year in remittances alone, more than the foreign aid and investment Africa receives combined. Imagine that same energy formally invited into legal reforms and judicial mobilization as a deliberate national strategy. Because the fight against poor governance and economic deprivation is not one we can afford to enter with half our talents uncounted for. A Nigerian trained lawyer on an arbitration panel in Paris, or advancing a global institution in New York, is not lost talent. It is talent operating at the highest global standard, available to be called home if we organize that bridge for it to cross. This too is what going beyond limits must mean for us. Refusing to accept that our infrastructural and governance challenges are any kind of ceiling on what is possible. I did not accept the limits the slum seems to set for me. I said this to you not as a theory, but as something I have laid. In November 2023, when the early provisional results of our runoff election made clear which way our country have voted, I did not wait for the counts to be completed or for the final result to be formally announced before I picked up the phone to congratulate my successor. There were those around me who suggested patience, who argues that a sitting president owes it to himself to contest every figure until the very last vote is satisfied. I choose otherwise. I choose to concede while the counting was still on the way, because I have always believed and still believe that the will of the people must stand above the ambitions of any one man in the democratic setting. Once elections do not follow democratic precepts, it is very dangerous for the peace and security of any country. I am told that one day's association extended its invitation to me. Its citation spoke directly of that decision of a leader who chose to put his country before his own ambition. And I want to thank the Nigerian Bar Association for that recognition. It means a great deal to me, not because I need reminding of what I did, but because it tells me that this bar understands precisely what is at stake when we insist that no office, however high, is worth more than the peace and the will of the people who confer it. If a small nation like mine can insist on that standard for itself, then surely this continent, with all its wealth of talent gathered in this very hall today, can insist on standards beyond the limits others have too often assumed for us. Let me say then, not only as a former president, but as a brother, a fellow traveler on this great continent of Africa, someone who understands deeply what it means to look at the wall of obstacles and decide to climb over it. When your leadership invited me to speak on the theme Beyond Limits, it resonated with the very core of my life journey. To go beyond limit is not a phrase reserved for athletes who breaks records or politicians who win elections. It is a daily mandate for every lawyer, every judge, every leader, and every citizen who refuses to let their present circumstances dictate their ultimate destination. Limits, more often than not, are imagination born out of fear of history or of the low expectation others have placed upon us. You already know part of my story. That boy from the slum of Monrovia in a little community called the Rock of Gibraltar, not the one between Morocco and Spain, was the Rock of Gibraltar in Monrovia. But every worded measure, that boy was not supposed to play on the grandest stages of world football, let alone win the Ballon d'Or. He was certainly not expected to one day lead his nation democratically. As president, so when I tell you that limits can be broken, I'm not offering you a theory. I'm offering you a life. How do we break these boundaries? We do it by anchoring our lives in 5 timeless, unshakable values. The first is discipline. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. In football, talent without discipline gets you benched or cut from the team entirely. In the law, brilliance without discipline leads to compromised justice. Discipline is the quiet commitment to doing what is right, what is necessary, and what is ethical, even when no one is watching. Coupled with discipline is the raw necessity of hard work, because there are no elevators to success. You must take the steps to push past the barriers of systemic corruption, weak infrastructure, or institutional inertia. We must be willing to work out our problems. As legal minds, your hard work secures the liberties of the common man and fortify the rule of law. Yet, our labor means nothing if it is not governed by respect. Respect for the dignity of every human being, for the sanctity of our institutions, and for the constitutions that bind us. True leaders do not go beyond limits by tearing others down. We go beyond limits by lifting others up, by respecting diversity of thoughts, and by upholding the integrity of the judicial process. When you push against limit, the limit push back. That is where perseverance becomes your greatest weapon. You will face defeat. I lost election before I ever won one. I lost matches before I ever raised a trophy. Perseverance is the internal voice that says, I will rise again. For the legal profession in Nigeria and across Africa, perseverance means standing firm for justice, even when the political and social winds blow fiercely against you. Most importantly, we cannot transcend human limits without being spiritually strong. We must acknowledge a power greater than ourselves. Spiritual strength gave us moral clarity. When our choices are blurred, it gave our conscience to our intellect and soul, to our ambitions, and it reminds us that every position of leadership we hold is a temporary stewardship granted by the Almighty to serve His people. My distinguished friends, Nigeria holds a key to the promise of our whole continent. When the Nigerian Bar Association decides to go beyond limits, the legal architecture of Africa itself grows stronger. Let us commit today to breaking that chain of mediocrity, applying discipline to our crafts, hard work to our duty, respect to our peers, perseverance to our trials, and faith to our foundational values. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let us all stand for the true justice, for the rule of law that builds greater unity, that make a nation more attractive to investment, and that creates a stable environment in place of internal conflict. True justice is blind. It does not know politics. It does not see family or friendship. It knows only the truth, and it interprets the law the same way, whether or not anyone is watching. Let us all interpret the law fairly, and apply it more effectively. Let justice prevail and be done to all men and women, rather than spending our energy on division. The true measure of a lawyer is not how many cases you have won, how many titles you have held, or how much you earn. It is this: when the country needs courage, do you have the courage to stand? When justice needs a voice, will you give it one? And when the law itself is threatened, will you go beyond every limit to defend it? The law must never be an instrument of chaos. It must never become a weapon of war. It must remain what it was always meant to be, an instrument of remedy, of peace, of unity, and of accountability, and an instrument of humanity, for transparency and for truth. My dear members of the Nigeria Bar Association, I invite you to think of yourselves as referees who interpret the law fairly and plainly as a lawyer. You must be able to protect the law whether the voice before you is rich, poor, or powerful. As the law provides, you must be able to stand in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. You must ensure that due process is honored. Let us respect the law and let us interpret it faithfully. I say to you, as with Lady Justice herself carried a scarf of substance and of justice, and let nothing tip them but the truth. My brothers and sisters, Nigerians depend on you. West Africa depends on you. Africa depends on you. The world depends on you. Democracy depends on you. And free and fair elections depend on you. So I say to all of you here today, Africa must continue in peaceful coexistence, and we must all stand up for the rule of law, stand up for fairness, stand up for impartiality, stand up for gender equality, stand up for equality, stand up for humanity, stand up for peace, and stand up for democracy, stand up against discrimination, stand up for accountability, stand up for free and fair elections. I say to you all, Nigeria Bar Association, bravo! Bravo! God bless the Nigeria Bar Association, and may God bless our beloved Africa. I thank you.